am I getting out Castleknock Gate before midnight? You know, there's none of that sort of panic. You're just getting on with what you're getting on with, which is often for us gardeners pure enjoyment, let's be honest. You know, that thing is stepping out into the garden for 5 minutes and you come back 5 hours later. That's being lost in the garden. That's being found in the garden. That's finding yourself in the garden. That's your true human nature, right? So I know some people may say, oh, okay, you know, yeah, we invented fire and we invented the wheel and technology has to happen and I have a great app that can identify the plant and whatever else. Yeah, brilliant. It's still connected to nature because that's your fundamental human nature, is to be a part of nature. And if we'd stuck on that path, I don't think we'll be at the point of thinking, will my grandchildren get a drink of water? You know? So this is the important thing, that if we stick with nature, we can save ourselves, we can save humanity. This is for the, sorry, no.
Don't cry!
That's just for effect, it's been visual. Did you just get that?
Please don't cry!
Sorry about that. Anyway, I just think it's so important, just looking at the world today, that's the way to rectify it. You know, we're looking at problems in terms of food security. Let's grow our own. You know, if we're growing our own, we're improving our food security. I know we can't grow everything, we can't all have a wheat field in our garden, but we can have strawberries. We can have strawberries that don't come in plastic punnets, driven all around the country in trucks belching out fumes. You know, we can cut down our carbon footprint. You know, we can make a climate action change by growing stuff. We can grow our own range of herbal teas. Again, we're not having to rip off packaging and leave it on the shelf somewhere. We have it ourselves. We step outside. We're getting into nature. We're harvesting from nature. We're keeping everything in a closed loop. But when you're growing your own, okay, you're eating your 5 a day, your 7 a day. But what are you doing with what you don't use? You're bloody composting. You're not throwing it in the bin. So all of this is really, really important. For an environmental thing, as humans, we need to get back to nature. It is the solution for most of the problems that we're actually facing. You know, even in terms of, you look at some of the, I'm not going to mention the C word, I'm not going to mention the MP word, but you look at kind of new diseases and stuff that's happening. Where is it coming from? It's coming from zoonosis. It's coming from the fact that we're eating very weird animals and it's allowing infections to get into the human system that wouldn't be there if we were actually a little bit more sustainable and we weren't chopping down vast patches of forests and driving animals out of their natural habitats and us further and further and deeper into territories where we end up eating unusual stuff like bats and pangolins and you name it, right? So we're okay here. I'm vegetarian, I don't eat sheep, I don't eat cattle or whatever, but we're okay for now. But where we may not be okay is in terms of our own food production, in terms of how we do treat animals, in terms of how much antibiotics are pumped into animals. And as growers, even for me, as a vegetarian who grows his own fruit and vegetable at home, how I feed those, how I sustain that, how I sustain my family, I don't rely on your sacks of NPK fertilizer. I make my own fertilizer. I get it from the garden. Every weed that grows in your garden is a dynamic accumulator. What that means is it can pull from the soil more trace elements than most of your ornamental plants even need to survive. So when you harvest out these plants, put them in a bucket of water, let them rot down for 2 or 3 weeks. You then get a liquid soil drench to add in copper, zinc, nitrogen, potassium, phosphorus, all of these. Yeah, it smells shocking. It's leave it at the side. I always say leave it at the side of your neighbours you don't like, you know. It smells worse than bad socks, you know, it's dreadful, but it's nutritious. So the soup you use as a soil drench, the solids that's in it, when you add them into the compost, all of the weed seeds and all of it being killed off, it is a compost activator. It brings in the right types of bacteria to really heat up your heap and break it down. So what we're doing is we're creating a closed loop. Now, if you look at stuff about food security now, because of what's going in Ukraine, there's big complications next year for, you know, €50 for your avocado on toast. You know, we're just not going to be getting the grain in here. It's going to cause a lot of problems all over the world. Even more than that, we're already at peak phosphorus. So your N, your K, and your P. Your N is your nitrogen, feeds everything. Your potassium and your phosphorus. That's got to do with kind of your flower development and your root development. So all three of those are kind of essential for growing the crops that we want. If we want more parsnips, we want more phosphorus in the soil, or bigger potatoes. If we want more cherries and more apples, we want more potassium there to help the fruit survive and the fruit turn into a flower. If we want bigger heads of cabbages, we want more nitrogen in the soil. So for us as home growers at home, where do you get that from? Well, your nettles and your grass clippings are just nothing but nitrogen packed in it. So can we compost that and then add that in? Comfrey contains potassium and phosphorus. Can we get that in? And then most of your weeds also accumulate this from the soil. So by using their weeds, that's another way of doing it. Now, this no mow May, leave your weeds, let your weeds come up. That's brilliant. That's brilliant because it's going to feed the bees, right? I don't know why they're saying no mow May, because I tell you when the bees need it, February. That's when the bees emerge in Ireland, right? And when we're talking about bees, honeybees, one species of honeybee in Ireland, and he's well looked after by Valley Honey and all of the Healy's honeys and all of those producers. There's acres and acres of rapeseed and other kind of nectar-rich and pollen-rich plants to keep that bee in production. I'm talking about the other 100 bees that live in Ireland. The 100 native bees, the carpenter bees, the solitary bees, the bees that don't produce honey at all, the 20-odd bumblebees that we have. Those guys need looking after. And where do they get their stuff from? They get their stuff from our gardens. They're the ones who are under threat because of habitat loss, because of changes in practice in farming, changes in practice in terms of where we're building. We're going to have to build a hell of a lot more houses to be able to sustain the population. So, you know, looking after the bees is really key and really important because we want all our plants pollinated. And I know sometimes you get a list and it's like, go out and get your echium and get this and get that. Now, the problem I have is that anything that's a plant flower that has, like the echiums, that has hundreds of little flowers contained on it, that's like a Tesco Express. The bee is just going to go in there to the shopping centre, get all its shopping done in one go, and then go off. In getting to the Tesco Express, that bee is going to ignore the bluebells, wood anemones, red campion, cuckoo flower, all of the other natives that are there, because it just takes too much time to go visit individual flowers. So what I would say to people is, instead of giving the bees their sugary treat and their instant access, make them work for it a little bit. And in working for it a little bit, they're going to pollinate all of the plants that we're under threat of losing. They will come and they will visit your garden. So really the bees that we need to look after is that type of bee. And you know the thing of like, you know, everybody's been going on about it. Einstein was going on about it in terms of if the bee population disappears, humanity has 4 years to live. And it's because, you know, pretty much, you know, 90% of everything that we use at some point had been pollinated by a bee. Everything from the fabrics we're wearing, to the food we're eating, to the natural medicines that we get, even to the artificial medicines we get that sometimes use particular sweeteners or other extracts of plants in them to give them a shelf life, is pollinated by bees. And they're not all pollinated by honeybees. It's all of the bees. It's all of the butterflies. It's all of the stirrup flies. It's all of the different insects that are pollinators. Now, you don't have to worry about sowing a wildflower meadow in your garden. Any garden will do the trick. If you are going to sow a wildflower meadow in your garden, I would beg you to make sure that it's of Irish provenance. There's no point in going and buying a mix and it's plants from the Balkans or plants from North Surrey, but different plants in that mix connected in than what we would have here. So if you're reading your native mix, you know, and in the side it has Californian poppy, that's not Irish, that's from California. You know, the clue is in the name. So, you know, try and plant native Irish species because again, they will feed all of the insects that are here. If they escape your garden and they get out into the wild, you're not introducing a native species somewhere. If you think of all of the invasive species that are in around the world, half of them at one point had an RHS merit of being a wonderful plant. So the big one in all of that is the Japanese knotweed. In the 1900s, it won an award as being a garden plant of merit. Little did we know that, you know, less than a century later, you won't get a mortgage if you have it on your property. You know. Now, here's the wonderful news, right? In Japan, that plant is used as a longevity tonic because that plant contains resveratrol. So resveratrol is an antioxidant, it rejuvenates the body. It's very much often found in red and purple skinned fruits, which is why your doctor used to say years ago, have a glass of red wine. It was the resveratrol that was good, glass, not bottle. Was one that was good for cleansing your blood. Turns out that Japanese knotweed, we can use it as a rhubarb substitute, we can use it as a spinach substitute, depending on your taste buds. And again, that's the way you get resveratrol in. So there's a weed, there's an invasive species that we can actually harvest. Now, I'm not saying dig her up out of wild where it is and bring it home and put it in your own garden, but I'm saying if we were clever enough, if I had it on my property, I would be harvesting it like a war of attrition. I'd be making rhubarb pies all day until it was gone. Because every time you cut back a plant, it has to use a piece of its root to regenerate the top surface. So when we're dealing with annual weeds, you just hold them off and they die away. When you're dealing with perennial weeds and you don't want to use chemicals, chop the head off. Think of the French Revolution. But look, let them eat cake, right? Chop the head off it. A little bit of the root will shrink, it'll regenerate. Chop the head off it. A little bit of the root will shrink, it'll regenerate it. Within no time at all, your dandelion is gone, your dock is gone, your invasive Japanese knotweed is gone. So we can harvest what we think of as being negative. I think weeds are beautiful. You all say a weed is just a plant in the wrong place. A weed is just a plant that's undervalued. You know, you think of nettles. What's having nettles in your garden? Nettles in your garden is a bowl of soup. Nettles on a bowl of soup that's nutritious, is the old Irish saying. 3 meals of nettles in May wards off illness for the rest of the year. Why? Well, the first meal is iron rich. So that's your blood sorted out. Anybody who's anemic, nettles is the best thing you can take, but it's a blood purifier. The second reason is because nettles are so nutritious, they contain lots of trace minerals that's really beneficial to the health, to cognitive function, to stomach health. And the third reason is nettles are antihistamines. So anybody who suffers with hay fever or pollen or anything like that, getting the nettle in your system is like a bit of immunotherapy. It's like taking your local honey. Your local honey has all the different pollen grades in it that you're going to experience in your time. There's no point in having the Manuka honey flown over from New Zealand because no Irish bee has gone on holidays to New Zealand. They're still stuck in Terminal 2 waiting. So get your local honey and take your local honey and let that influence you, or use the plants that have a small amount of histamine in them to boost your system. But the other wonderful thing that nettles do is they bring ladybirds into the garden. An individual ladybird will eat up to 500 aphids in its lifetime. So you're not having to get your sprayer out with your artificial chemicals to try and kill off the green fly and the black fly and your roses and your plants. You're bringing natural predators in the garden to do it. So there's a holistic way. I'm known as the holistic gardener. Now you know why. It's that whole holistic approach to how we actually use a garden, harvest the garden, connect in with nature, you know, fulfill our full potential as gardeners, fulfill our full potential for the planet, be human in the process of doing it, and interconnect with one another. That's the fantastic thing about it, is that gardeners will take a slip and talk to you about it. Gardeners will save seeds and share seeds. Gardeners will share their knowledge and their inspiration, you know, get us talking good luck, you know. And I think a lot of it is because sometimes gardening is a very solitary practice, that you're in there doing it. So when you do get a chance to saddle up beside somebody and and talk about it, it just flows, you know. And gardening teaches us lots of life skills. And I might save that talk for tomorrow, so I'll try and get you all a free pass, right? So it's that thing that it's our life skills that we learn from the garden. One of the most important things that we learn is to be resilient, because not every seed germinates. We learn to be patient. We learn to hang on, where's the lavender? Hang on. Is that we learn to be patient and we learn to be resilient. So that's the wonderful thing about being gardeners. What cool. Give us all a round of applause. What cool.
Yes, thank you.
Thanks, Millie. Oh, thank you.